Hello everyone, and today we're going to be looking at Squad again. After my initial first review type stuff, as well as having a couple hundred more hours after the fact, as well as getting other people involved in this, I thought that I would want to make this video because it's not only helpful to myself, but also helpful to other people because I just like to get information and stuff out there. It's weird, and again, after that whole Mega Squad video that I posted as well, I thought that it would be better to follow up with some sort of squad type video as well. I think I'm going to be posting one more video after this to end off the month really quickly, mainly due to the fact that I want to get the video out as quickly as possible. I already have it recorded, I just needed the actual gameplay for it. Same for this video. Anyway, if you've already seen the title, you're probably wondering, well, how the fuck do you actually do this? Or what should you do to try and teach new players? There's a lot of information out there, but I think that I'm going to condense it down to my personal preferences. And I'm going to more or less split it up into two different sections. And I'm more or less going to split these tips and stuff up into two different areas. One of them being that if you have a random on your team that is their first new game, as well as tips where it's actually a friend that you want to get into the game. Now, this is assuming that you've already gotten them interested in this sort of game, as well as they are interested enough to actually buy and maybe play it. The reason why I'm making this is because recently, one of my very long-time friends from other games, and who I play video games with a lot, also started taking up Squad because, well, he thought that it was really interesting. Plus, he already had it in his game library. Though he really only plays with me and sometimes plays with other people, as I've seen. But it's whatever. And it was in playing his very first few games with me that I realized that Squad doesn't actually give you a lot of the same sorts of stuff. They have a pretty good tutorial that gives you some of the general basics, but Squad is more or less a game about shared knowledge. So that's what this point of this video is. In any case, let's get into how to be a better teacher to both randoms and people that you know. So one of the first main things is that you need to be more or less one of the first main things I would say is try to be as specific with your instruction as you possibly can. Now, this comes down to knowing the difference between habs and fobs, as again, some of the newer players will think that, well, there's only fobs on the list, but you keep saying hab. That's just actually a thing that I do on accident, because fob and hab oftentimes are used interchangeably. Do note that you also should try to make sure that you get the map coordinates correct. This comes down to basic experience and whatnot. The best way to do this, in my opinion, is to just hold open the enter map rather than just your regular map. So if they say, oh, should I spawn at the C5 or X or the C5 or H5 hab, you need to be sure that they know about that. Number 2, what you should also allow them to do is get them to make sure that they know what they're looking at and, well, how they're looking at who they're supposed to be. And make sure that they know the difference between each of the stuff. But that's more or less for other people to talk about. Number 2, try not to raise your voice at them. These are new players. Getting snippy with them and getting upset is a little bit of a turnoff for some people. Try to remain as calm as possible, especially if you're dealing with things like squad leading and stuff. Do try to note that you should try to say, please try to keep your questions to a minimum if possible, or if at any point, or more or less, what you should actually be talking about with them is to say, try to push off their question. Well, not try to push off their question, but try to stave off their question if you're in the middle of combat by just saying, give me 5 or give me a minute, because you need to deal with certain other things before you having to deal with their questions. Now, let's get into the tips for actually getting a good squad if it's other people. One of the things that I highly recommend when starting a new person out is to try, at least if you know the person and you're in like a sync call with them, if you're in a squad of around 2 or 3 people, go an armor squad, or at the very least go a vehicle squad. Any sorts of vehicle will really work, whether that be BMP or whether that be something else. if you have two experienced players and one new player, the new player should try to be a commander seat. At least that's how I tended to learn. Commander seat, while yes is really good, is also mainly not the one who's technically driving. But if you only have just the two of you, driving is not bad either. Explain to them basic concepts and try to be as engaging as possible with each of what they're doing. Again, some of the natural callouts is armor forward, armor to the east, or armor to right, or armor to left. Try to make sure to keep the orientation of your armor in the correct formats. This is basically something that you would go over more or less in an armor type game rather than anything else. If you're really ballsy, or if you're really good at being a pilot, I would also recommend getting them into a pilot's type role. Not in flying, of course, because they're a new person, but having a gunner in a pilot's role is actually better in some cases, because that means that the helicopter can actually fire back. And you can even teach them maybe how to fly, or they can at least have fun shooting a giant ass machine gun, which is always good. If you're doing it for a regular random squad, logi runs, especially if you're building a fob or a hab, is very good as well. Playing a more defensive role and just getting them acquainted with the basic movement and use of vehicles in the games is always very good. Because if they understand the basics, that means the more complex things, such as shooting, target identification, and other stuff, will come along much more easier. Again, this is more or less how I was trained, or I was brought up, or trained, quote unquote, by the people that I used to play with by the people that I still kind of squad up with from time to time. Now, if you're doing it with a random person in the thing, if you're doing it with a random person in an infantry squad, 100% recommend logi runs, especially if you're playing defensively and building habs. Habs are more important, and to have the more experienced players go out and actually kill, while you have the other, more newer player going back and doing logi runs, is still being very helpful. If there are no logis or transports or anything available, then having them along, at least by your side, is at the very least good to have around. Another gun on the field is never a bad sign, but do just make sure that they understand the basics of concepts, and if they ask any questions, do feel free to try and answer them as quickly as you can. Same rules apply from before. And I think that finally, I would say the following two things, which are going to actually more or less contradict earlier statements. If you're with a friend and you're actually good, if you are not as good with squad leading as you think you are, or if the squad leading is just being stressful, or you just don't want to squad lead, do make sure that you actually stick with them, stick with that new player like they're glue. An army of two and 2 guns are better than 1. Plus, 4 sets of eyes are always better too. Also, what you should try to do is pick a class that complements their actual loadouts. So if they pick rifleman, more or less any other class would really benefit from a rifleman. If they're a medic, picking a rifleman is, and if it's the reverse, it's the same kind of deal. Think of these classes as kind of blood types, whereas with riflemen, they are the more or less general donor, and they are the general donor / receiver of help. But again, with some of the other classes, it's very difficult to really do it. Also, again, try not to dissuade them from making the choices that they want to make. So if they want to run a medic game, do try to support them by being a rifleman that can actually resupply them to have more bandages. Or if they want to try a lad or a hat, again, rifleman is always a good time. But medics and other sorts of support type roles will never ever be really dissuade. Finally, I would say that since you only have so much of your experiences, I would highly recommend that you go and have them check out other people who do the same kinds of content like this. Mainly people who do this more or less as a kind of job, or other YouTubers that I would highly recommend. The 3 that I can think of off the top of my head are OperationDrewski, Karmakut, who's, I think that's his name. I'll probably correct myself in the editing process, as well as MoiDawg. In the following order, I would highly recommend the following. I would highly recommend these 3 as they have a lot of squad content and also have some very good squad tutorials as well. of the three, I would say that Karmakut is the more or less not the one that I would highly recommend, mainly due to the fact that I don't know too much about his content. While he does seem like he has a general idea and does have some very interesting points, it doesn't hurt to have him in the back pocket. But again, I can't recommend him highly, mainly because of I don't know how much his content actually is helpful. Because, again, I don't watch much of his content. But he does have some squad content. So, you're there. 2 is OperationDrewski, who I can actually recommend more than Karmakut for the simple reason that I've actually seen a lot of his content, and a lot of his squad content is very, very good. Now, he doesn't have many things in the ways of tutorials, but he does have a lot in terms of gameplay, which is also very good. Learning from others' gameplay is a very excellent way to know how you can actually communicate with your team, effective communication, placement of shots, etc., etc. And if you do like a sort of watch party with your other friends, he is a very good one to have because, again, you can break down a lot of his gameplay because of how Squad operates and because of how he actually edits his video. I can't recommend him any more than the final person on this list, MoiDawg, mainly because, well, he has other games and other content that he posts on his channel. Things like Escape from Tarkov, Arma 3, and a few other tactical type shooters. So you need to be very picky about which kinds of content you're trying to go for. But if you want a variety of content in general and don't really care about that and maybe want to explain just in general tactics to someone, I guess you can not go any better. However, MoiDawg, in my personal opinion, is the one that I would most highly recommend for several reasons. One of the biggest ones is that he's actually a partner with the squad. He's a partner with Squad, meaning that he can do the following. He has access to more or less insider information, kind of, and is one of the first in terms of news and is very engaging when it comes to his content. A lot of his stuff is easily breakdownable because of the way that he edits his videos, and he also plays a lot of the actual game itself and streams it consistently. What's also good is that he tends to also play a variety of different game modes as well as a variety of different kits. He even has several really good examples of very good tutorials on various aspects of the squad gameplay and breaks it down in such a way that not only can new players really learn a lot, but older players who don't remember as much or who are getting a little bit rusty can easily come in and do a review. He's very engaging and 100% would recommend him for that, for both newer and older players, mainly due to the fact that he is the man to go for when it comes to these kinds of types of news and whatnot. But that's, again, my personal opinion. In any case, I think that that's all of the stuff that I really wanted to talk about. So yeah, to quickly go over, just for a quick bit, try to be very patient and understanding with the newer players, and always be as inviting as you can be with these sorts of people, because they're just learning the game. And while you know a lot of the stuff that you do, a lot of the same thing can't be said about other people, especially if they're new to this kinds of game. But that's just my personal opinion. All the relative links to everyone that I mentioned will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this talk or something, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.